It's not a game, it's a rich thing.
pardon. Happy Friday Eve. It's Thursday. It snuck up on me. Ugh. It is cold here. Thank you, Druid. It's cold here. I'm wearing a hat. I'm wearing warm socks. Next thing I know, I'll be sweating. It is that kind of weather. The leaf mold, we've had kind of some on and off, sort of very dry. It's very dry right now, but over the weekend we had some, I don't know, it wasn't like very hard rain, but it was rain. So the leaf mold, it's problematic. If you're not allergic to it, you may not be aware of it. But the leaves come down, they get wet, they get a little moldy, and then things dry up, and then that mold goes everywhere. Those little spores go everywhere. So needless to say, I'm allergy-y. I've got like patches of itchy on my face. So yeah, cake's in bad shape right now. But don't feel bad. I've got fun things to look at today. So hi Quiltish, it is so good to see you. It's been a minute. You've been busy, up to some stitchy hijinks. Snow. Yeah, Druid had some snow the other day, I think, and a couple of our friends up in New England, I think Jill said she had some flurries the other day. So, I mean, wasn't it like 5 minutes ago I was complaining about how hot it was? So before I get started, just a reminder, over on Quilt Nerding, we are reading this book, A Stitch in Time by Amy Newell. It is so good. It's about older women and their stitching projects in the antebellum era. It seems very niche, but it's very relatable, especially if you're a lady of a certain age. So I highly recommend it, even if you can't hang out with us on Tuesday nights. If you do like a book list for the holidays, for Christmas or whatever, put it on your book list because it's a really good book. Okay, so it's warmed up for you, Druid. Yeah, it's like one day here will be in the 60s, really nice, and the next day will be like just hovering in the low 50s, and it's like, it's just uncomfortable enough outside that you want to put a coat on or a jacket, and then you get hot. It's this weather. I realize it's November, but I just think about growing up in the fall in Virginia is really like this as well. I mean, I'm not that far, where one day it would be like great weather. Oh, I could wear the new sweater I got for my birthday. But then like by afternoon, it would be so hot I'd be sweating. So I'm not saying I'm looking forward to cold weather, but I am kind of looking forward to consistency, because I keep having to turn my heat on and off. It was freezing cold upstairs yesterday, but it was hot downstairs. Oh, just a mess. Anyway, so enough about the weather and the temperature. What I want to talk about today, and it's going to be a little bit all over the place because I've sort of looking in books and kind of going around through my bin of fabric collection. And then also looking through my reproduction stuff because I just have random reproduction fabrics I've picked up. And those were not necessarily all in one place. I need to cut out like sample swatches of some of these fabrics so then I can just toss them back in my big bin of fabrics for sewing with. So what I wanted to look at today, and you guys know we approached Brackman's Clues in the Calico. We looked at, I think it was chapter 4. That is no longer available. I took that down because I wasn't asked to or anything, but because it is a copyright violation, I will step right up there and say that. I read that chapter to you guys and I left it up for a week or so because I wanted to share it. Not everybody has this book. And I do know Barbara, and although I haven't told her that I read a chapter of her book, I'm 99% sure she would not mind. So, but I did not want to leave that out there, and it is not going to be on my YouTube archived out there. So if you missed it, get in touch with me if you want to see it, and I can give you a private link. But I just don't want it out there that was for you guys and it was for me, and that's all I'll say about it. But yeah, if you missed it and you want to see it, let me know. But otherwise, that kind of goes in my archive of goodies. I've been working on a private archive of goodies, and I'm also really thinking about, and I don't even know what this project would entail. It entails some technology know-how that's above my pay grade. But I keep thinking, why don't we have a fabric dating, or why can't there be a fabric dating database that AI can look at? Because, as you know, AI isn't like super creative. It is not helpful in many human endeavors. However, what it is better at than humans is catching patterns and kind of making connections that human minds don't always make. So I was thinking, like, through the data that's in these books, and I will address these again in a second, but these books, and by no means are these books complete in any way, but sharing the data with these, of these books with an AI, or with a database, within a database, and then feeding it to AI, and then, showing it fabric samples that we have information on. I mean, would it not be kind of a cool database? And the thing about the challenge about kind of crowdsourcing is kind of, again, where I'm thinking, like, with sort of the basics, that we have from the experts, and, people that have swatch books of fabrics, that have, some, not provenance, that's not the right word I'm looking for, but like some date ranges and descriptors that, we can hang a hat on, not just like, this fabric without context could be misconstrued what it is. And this is a reproduction. I'll talk about what this is in a little bit, but some way, I don't know, to like expedite this stuff. I don't know. I mean, I'm not looking for shortcuts. I'm just looking for, some way to help people like me that are really trying to wrap our minds around things. So what I wanted to talk about today are neons, conversation prints, and shirtings. I think conversation prints and shirtings are easy. They are very easy, in my opinion. When you see them, you know them. And I think that probably the most challenging thing would be, like, if you're looking at something online, like say you want to buy a quilt and you're looking on eBay and you're like, oh, those look like conversation prints, and they want, hundreds of dollars for a quilt. And you're thinking, okay, conversation prints, they're a particular time and place. And then fast forward to the future, we have all of these reproductions because people love that particular time and place. It's the turn of the century. 1880s, 1890s, 1910s. And so, being able to determine these things will help you figure out if something that you can't feel with your hands is legitimate. So I don't know. I mean, I think I probably could be accused of trying to make things easier, like trying to, look for a shortcut. And I mean, yeah, it is kind of a shortcut, I guess. So I wanted to look at these three types of fabrics. And again, conversation prints and shirtings, I think, are easy. When you see them, once you know what they are, they're very easy to pick out. Shirtings, maybe, there's a caveat with shirtings, and I'll address that. The other one are the neons. And I've been talked to you guys a number of times about neons, and it's something I had never heard this term before until I was at a retreat, and a couple of people mentioned it and said, oh, that reproduction fabric reminds me of a neon. I actually bought a yard of said reproduction fabric, and could I find it this morning? No. I think I packed it away recently because I was like, I won't use that fabric anytime soon. Famous last words, right? So, but every time, and then neons again have come up a couple times in some quilt study groups I've gone to, and just a conversation with people. And I keep asking the question of, some knowledgeable folks, where can I find information about neons? Well, the blanket, suggestion is Clues in the Calico. There is no mention of Clues in the Calico that I have yet found. Now, I have not read this book cover to cover yet, but we did read chapter 4. And while I think, and I didn't take a picture of this, but if you remember this page of chapter 4 has these swatches, and I think top row center, I think that could qualify as a neon. And I realize this is not a super great picture. I know I did take a picture of this and I have it, but I didn't pull it up. So what I've figured out about neons, as best as I can tell, is that they are typically a black fabric with, it's not necessarily a very simple design, but it is one color on black, and it may have either I don't know, not necessarily an ombre effect, but like kind of a glow to it. And I think that's kind of where the neon idea comes from. It's bright. It's kind of unexpectedly bright, but it's also got this like glow to it. And we'll look at a couple of examples that I'm guessing are neon, and I've been told are neon. So first of all, let me share my screen because I took pictures, and I will remind you guys, I'm sometimes not the best picture taker. I'm usually trying to be fast, but I want you to be able to see things without me having to hold them up. So, the books that I have in my library that I'm pulling information from, and you may have these too, Dating Fabrics, A Color Guide, 1800 to 1960 by Eileen Tristane. This is a very good book. But, the thing is, like, I don't care how big of a book some of these experts put together, they're never going to get everything. So, I think that just from reading Eileen's book, and it's like a cookbook almost. It comes together with all these little swatches. And it's spiral bound, and that's wonderful. But I think what she put this together kind of with representative fabrics. I mean, that's the only way to do it. Otherwise, this book would be 8,000 pages long and cost $1 million. This book is pretty easy to find. I find it being given away a lot, when people are getting rid of their books. Like, it seems like everybody had this book. Her second volume is 1960s to 2000s, and that book must not have been printed in as many copies. Or people, I'm assuming the print run just wasn't as great. It is much more difficult to find. And when you do find it, it's expensive. And I think I found a copy this morning for like $55. Well, I mean, there are certain books I will pay $55 for, but not this one. However, if you ever see it, it's not this one, but it's the second volume, let me know, because I would love to have that one. It's one of those books where I keep hoping it's going to come up. When people are getting rid of books, there's a particular book, and not to digress, but this particular book called Lavish Legacies. It was written by Jennifer Goldsboro, and it is about Baltimore album quilts. And it was about a specific Baltimore album exhibit here in Baltimore, in Maryland. And I can't remember the dates. It's a while back. Well, I kept trying to find the book used, and I couldn't. And I kept looking and looking and looking. Finally, I broke down, and I bought it at the Maryland Center for History and Culture, which I think that might be where the original show was. Like, it's their book. Like, they published it in, I think, in conjunction with someone else. And darn if, as soon as I paid full price, and I think I got a discount because I'm a member of the Maryland Center, everybody's given that book away. I've been offered it like half a dozen times. I have found it for $5, $10, etc. So, moral of the story, I've been waiting for Dating Fabrics, the second volume, to come to me that way. It hasn't yet. So, like, I know if I do go out on a limb and like ask for it for Christmas or just buy it myself, it's gonna come to me. So I keep holding out. Anyway, long story short, but this is a good book, and we'll look at a couple pages from here. The second book is, you may not be as familiar with this one. I wasn't until a while back. But this one's called Calico Man, the Manny Cop Fabric Collection, and the pictures in here are fantastic. And he's an interesting story. I won't go too deeply into him, but Bobby Ogg, who passed away not terribly long ago. I want to say it might have been over the pandemic. I actually own a quilt from her collection. Sharon Newman, I don't know a whole lot about, but they in conjunction with Manny Cop's son Paul, Paul shared the collection with them, and they took pictures and put them in this wonderful book. Or they got, these are professional pictures. They're really nice. But the challenge with this one is, and so I know I won't say I wasn't going to get too deeply into Manny Cop, but he was a textile designer, and he worked in the industry, and he just started collecting stuff that literally in the beginning they were throwing away. These these textile mills were like, yeah, we don't want to print this anymore. We don't print this anymore. We never wanted to print this. And he just started picking them up and saving them. And eventually, I mean, you can see in this picture, he ended up with these like big volumes. And in some cases, I think they were the actual, like, he was just getting the books, not creating a book himself, but getting like literally the books from the mills and preserving them. And then I think in other cases, he picked up fabric scraps and put them together in books, from what I can tell. And apparently his son Paul, after Manny passed away, Paul ends up with all these boxes and boxes of fabrics, and he just is like, yeah, whatever, Dad had these fabrics. Well, then he starts to look at them, apparently, and some quilt guilds were like, we heard you have these fabrics. Can you come talk about them? So he started, like, his son started going on kind of this like, speaking engagement tour of, about the collection. And then that's when Bobby Ogg and Sharon Newman got involved and were like, let's get great pictures of these. Let's put them in a book. Now, the challenge with this book is it's not in any particular order. Like by date. It's sort of like, it's just put together in groups of fabric. So like you might find a page that, are all, for example, I just flip open to French steel mill engravings, and they're like all these lovely purplish colored fabrics. So you've got 2 pages of that, and those are 1852, but then you'll skip to the next page, and these are things from like 1900. So, they're not in any particular order, like, in my opinion. Maybe there's a method to the madness I haven't figured out yet, but it is just kind of pages of calico. There's a section on indigos and a section on plaids, and then some salesman samples, morning prints. There's a whole section on morning prints, which I think is quite good. And there's some just interesting intel in here. There's something called Leno weaves, Leno weaves. And these include additional threads woven over the top of a printed design. I don't know how those are different than dimity. Dimity is another type of fabric that kind of has like a texture because it's got another other threads woven kind of to give it texture. I'm guessing dimities maybe aren't prints. They're more of like a solid or sort of stripy by virtue of the weaving, whereas these lino weaves are they're turn of the century, so 1900s to 1920s. So anyway, I'm digressing. We're not going to look at these lino weaves, but there's a whole section of them in this book, which I think are fantastic. So anyway, Calico Man, it's a great book. I think I got this one probably from Abe Books or from a bookseller. Not terribly expensive. So that's the thing, like, these are kind of all over the place. I mentioned Brackman the other day. Was hard to find when I first got this copy, but I looked the other day and I think that I found copies for like $20. And you can still buy a PDF version, I think, for like, I don't know if it's like $10 or $15 directly from C&T. So these are the 3 books I've been looking at. There's got to be other books. I know there are, but I'm not 100% sure like what they are. I don't have them in my collection. So if you guys know of something, by all means, please let me know. Something that you've seen out there. I am getting ready to do an interlibrary loan for a book that I haven't been able to find anywhere except at university libraries. When I was in New York, I looked for it at the New York Public Library. They were the only library, it seemed like, in the state of New York that didn't have the book I'm looking for. And it has nothing to do with fabric dating, but I think that maybe there might be some sort of textbook kind of books that I just don't know what I don't know. So, in my quest to do some interlibrary loaning, I am going to see if there's some more books on fabric dating that are maybe more of a textbook type of thing. So, let me see. Let me recombobulate myself a little bit. Get my screen here. And like I said, I took all of these pictures sort of in no particular order. So, okay. So the Calico Man. And then, of course, Clues in the Calico by Barbara Brackman. And I just snagged one picture out of here that we did not look at when we looked at chapter 4. Because she does talk about conversation prints very briefly. And she's got a great picture of one. So, to start off, I'm flipping through the Calico Man the other night, and I'm like, haha, here's what I think are possibly neons down here. And let me zoom in, and you see these colors on black. They really pop, and the shape of them, you know, these have these sort of little, like, little dotty kind of things. These over here have sort of regions of color. It's not really ombre, but you can see there's like the lighter lavender here and then the brighter purple. I think this is what we're kind of looking for when we look at these neon prints. I think this is, I mean, again, I'm doing my best here, and if anybody knows anything differently, please tell me. I kind of have started to wonder if neons are kind of like, quote unquote, you know it when you see it, but there's just no good like resource out there that's printed about them maybe. And I think that's probably one of those things that frustrates me the most is I greatly value the information that I've been able to get from my colleagues who have many more years of experience than I do. But sometimes it's, you know, it's really like you ask the question, you know, how do you know? And you often get the response, well, because I've looked at hundreds of quilts and I just know. And that's a frustrating answer, even though it's probably a very true answer. You know, you look at 100 quilts that have for sure dates on them. You know, they have some type of provenance. They're in a museum. They've been in a family. They have been, you know, documented by dealers and etc. And so you have like for sure certain data about a quilt, and you look at hundreds of these quilts like this, you start to recognize things and you start to understand, you know, what you're looking at. And then it just becomes, I mean, this is just like anything that you become an expert in. Sometimes it's hard to backtrack on your expertise unless there's something very, very specific that you have referenced, like a book or a paper or a group of books and papers. So without, you know, some like a fabric dating expert beside me, this is what I've got, right? So long story short, what I'm trying to say is I've identified these as being neon prints, even though they are not labeled as such. They are simply labeled, let's see, here, he has got the actual names of these along with the dates. So these are all 1903, so turn of the century. Lodi gymnast, Lodi gumbo apparel. That's what we know about these. And I think I haven't read the book cover to cover, but I think that there's probably like there's some kind of key to this information that he provides, similar to the way Brackman has keys and things in her work. So here's another one. And these just, I wanted to point out these beautiful paisleys. He doesn't have dates on these, but I don't think. Oh, he's got dates on a couple of them. Or no, let's see. 97 and 99, and then 100 and 102. Okay, so no, he does not have dates on these, but I think these are probably the 20s because he's got another page of these types of prints that are from the 20s. I have a quilt that has a whole bunch of late 1800s fabrics on the front side. The backing is one of these types of paisleys, definitely 1920s. So, you know, like, again, this is where I think I've really struggled with fabric dating because I'm afraid to say I think that's what this is because I feel like I'm going to be told I'm wrong. And I have been told I'm wrong a number of times. So I'm trying harder, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. These are all very pretty, but I think these are the neons. And I don't think that this little branchy, like it reminds me of coral kind of branching off. I don't think that's a specifically neon thing, but I've seen a lot of fabrics that I'm thinking are neons that have that little like sort of design element. But you can see what I mean. Like it's not really ombre like we recognize ombre as being, and I want to say is it 1840s, I think, does have like truly an ombre that they were able to print. But this is literally little bands of color. You can see there's this band of color, and then there's like, it's almost white on top. It's just like a white with just a little tint of that purple. And then same thing over here. I think you can see it better with this pink, these sort of layers of pink. So, and what I'm noticing is pink and this like really bluish purple periwinkle kind of. Those are the colors that I think come up as neons. The fabric I first saw that somebody described as a neon was this pink. And then some of these other ones, one that I have, an actual antique piece of fabric that's been told to me as a neon is purple. So I think those may be the two colors that are, going to tell us something. Here's a couple more. These right here. Now, all of these seem to be like colorways, right? Like they kind of all kind of go together. Maybe they're all from the same manufacturer. And indeed, he says up here, 2 colorways. So 117 and 118. 2 colorways of that. But I really like this one. 112 to 114, Communion. 115 to 116, the Communist or Communist. I swear when I first look at this, I thought it's a communist. But I think it's Communion and Communist, not Communist. And there's a question for you guys that always look up dates for me. Is 1902, were they using the term communist yet? Like, I know that your great communist leaders of Russia, I mean, this is kind of the time period, I think, right? When the concept of communism, I mean, it's like when the czars were defeated, right? I don't know my Russian history at all. Maybe you guys do. But I thought these were interesting terms. So communion and communist or communist. But whatever they are, I think these are neons. And just as a side note, look at this. I just noticed this one. It's just a little doodad, but it's an interesting little doodad. It's got like I don't know, it kind of looks a little bit like something scientific, or maybe, yeah, I don't know. Something scientific, I feel. Okay. Neons. Let's see. I'm just going to keep going. And I think that this jumps into, yes, conversation prints. Sometimes called character prints. In Brackman's book, she called them object prints. And she only has, I think, one example. But you can see why people love these. They're really cute. They were, again, turn of the century. This is kind of where everything that I'm looking at today comes from. Turn of the century. Maybe as early as 1880s, but mostly like 1890s, 1910s. And you can see this, you've got these adorable animals. So like lions and hyenas, monkeys, stags, like just a very interesting bunch of animals. Um, this, I'm not sure, it gives me croquet vibes, but also like it's a mallet and a triangle. Like, could it be a square? Could it be a carpenter square? Maybe it's a mallet and a carpenter square. I don't know. Um, this gives you that very chinoiserie look. You've got the little, like, looks like a little bridge over some water. This little house, kind of pagoda-esque. But some of these other things I think really tell us this is, these stylized butterflies and birds and things. What looks like it could be like a stylized Chinese character. I think it's this whole idea of like they were very into Asian look, and that goes from your Victorian era all the way into the 20s. So you see all these different kinds of like quote unquote Asian, and they did not discriminate between what's Chinese, what's Japanese, it's just all Asian to them, Orientalism. So that's kind of, I think, what you're seeing here. And then here, of course, horseshoes and horses were very popular. More horseshoes and little riding crop. And this one I thought was really neat. This has got like such modern vibes to it. It's almost like a quilting pattern, sort of. But then you sort of like a cheater print almost, maybe. But then you've got the sun and stars. So very unique, in my opinion. Here's some more. He's got some in his collection. He had some really great stuff. So here you've got hunting dogs with some birds in the bush. I think this might be like a top, like a toy top, maybe. Pins and needles were very popular. So these look like they're pins. More horseshoes, pennants, and card suits. I think probably these might be popular sort of towards the end of the era. But I have a couple of things in my greater textile collection where, as people, particularly early 20th century, I think as people sort of, you have more discretionary income. You have, women that are sort of, or people that are at a kind of a higher middle class, like middle class. And they're women that maybe had household help and or didn't necessarily have to spend all their time cooking, cleaning, etc. So leisure activities such as playing cards were really big. And I have like some card table, like table toppers that one has the card suits in the corners. And I think I have found where it comes from. It's from like Workbasket or one of the ladies' magazines that had how to make this little card table cover. So when I see stuff like this, I'm immediately thinking like 19 teens, maybe even after World War One. Here's some more. These are little globes, more little pins, but these are also the card, clubs and hearts. And then these, I would not have immediately recognize these as conversation prints, but they're in the same colors. You start to notice conversation prints are a lot of times reds and black or gray. French steel mill engravings, like the French were, I think, big in making these. Yeah, so floating buttons, that's the one. Oh, and fishing bobbers. Okay, that's what 11 is, fishing bobbers. Yeah, I could see that. And these are floating buttons, but to me they don't look like buttons. They look more like, I don't know, communion wafers or something. And then I think this might be his last page. So you've got the horse head. The horse head and the dog head are very popular. You've got the little jockey here. And then you've got more card suits. You've got more little pins. And then here, this seems to be a little bit more clear. You've got this mallet or hammer and then just a kind of a design motif. But that speaks more to me of like, the craftsmanship of, a builder or something. Oh, there were more. These dog's heads are ones that I've seen quite a bit. You've got the anchors. Anchors are also very big. More of the card suits here, kind of stylized versions. It kind of surprises me how many of these he has, whereas I have not seen as many of these out in the wild. And I mean, we know I haven't seen everything else out there. This one was interesting. This looks like bed springs, and indeed, the title calls this springs. We've got keys, we've got the fleur de lis, and then this. They appear to be like bent nails things. Just very interesting. And you kind of wonder, like, as far as fabric designers, like, you know, this is a pleasing looking thing, but what was their inspiration? Now, I have taken fabric design classes. I did an intensive workshop with a fabric designer. This was pre-pandemic, probably like 2014 or so. And with her, it was more about how to design. When I was in college, I also took some fabric design, and it was about inspiration and how to do like the interlocking prints. Because if you just design something, put it out there as a repeat, it can look very repeaty. Like you want it to be like tossed. You want it to have a pleasing look, whether it's a swatch like this or whether it's yardage. So I learned how to do that. And it's just interesting where people's, inspiration comes from. Maybe this person was doodling their bed springs one day and went like, oh, that would make some wonderful fabric. So Druid has some details for us. Okay. So the term communist was in use in 1902. So then these fabrics with the name of, was it here? Yeah, communist. It's very interesting. So it has historical roots extending back to the mid-19th century, notably gaining prominence with the 1848 publication of the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Okay, so 1848. Another date to add to our timeline. The Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, RSDLP, a Marxist party founded in 1898, was active and included factions that would later become known as the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. Okay, the Mensheviks. I don't know if I've heard that term. I mean, the Bolsheviks, you always hear about the Bolsheviks. Okay, interesting. So what were these pattern designers thinking of? 1709 communist, and then 17 communion has a very different connotation than communist. I don't know. Okay, moving right along with the conversation prints. He did have, there were a lot more pages than I thought. Okay, look at these. This one is so fun. Look at this. I don't even know what all this is. You've got like 6s and 9s, maybe. You've got this little trident. I don't know what this is, a word bubble or something, a key maybe. Now look at this thing. This is like it looks like the kind of thing you cut linoleum with. And then this other one, is that the same thing? I don't know. This one is just a lot of different things. What does it say? Symbols. We've got anchors again. This is cute. These are like a little tambourine, but then it's got this little picture on it. What does he call this one? Circles. And some of these, were these the names given to these fabrics by the printer, or were these things that Manny Kopp just gave them the title? I don't know. So turrets. Here's a little guy. I think he says this one's a juggler. Looks like he's got some sort of stick and he's juggling something. What is number 33? Grommets. Okay. This one's interesting. Look, it's like all this ship rigging. And then you've got the bosun up here in the ship rigging. Some women in, I guess, is it women? People in one of these, I can't remember what these boats are called. but this I think is, you're going back to that chinoiserie. Like this is obviously a Southeast Asian image. Here, it looks like she's in a bathing costume. Looks like maybe they're looking for, I don't know, they're fishing for something, oysters. I don't know. And then you've got this guy on the horse. This looks like he could be, it looks like the Stars and Bars maybe. So this is an interesting one. And more horses. Goodness gracious, the horses. They loved the horses. Scissors. I love this one. I think this is great. The cards. Now you've got the cards, not just the suits. These cute little dogs. Looks like he's balancing a ball on his nose. And then you have, these are kind of like bobby pins maybe, or some kind of little doodad. Another cards, and then more horseshoes. So let's go up here and see if he's got any. Yeah, steel mill engravings. So 45. So this is a steel mill engraving. As opposed to a different type of print. So, you know, the engraving, you know, how is that different than, you know, say a different type of, I think the other types of rollers were maybe brass. So I don't know, you know, does this technology, this steel engraving create like a finer print? If you think about like just print technology, like an art, you know, etched engravings are typically very, very fine. So what was this other one before the bent arrows in blue and red? So that's what this is. Okay. Oh, another intel. All right, so the Mensheviks. The Mensheviks were a faction of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party that emerged in 1903, advocating for a more moderate and gradual path to socialism compared to the Bolsheviks. They believed a bourgeois democratic revolution was necessary before a socialist one could occur. Interesting. And favored a broad, inclusive party membership rather than a smaller one of professional revolutionaries, as championed by Vladimir Lenin. Key figures included Julius Martov and Pavel Axelrod. The main difference between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks is that the Bolsheviks favored a small, disciplined party of professional revolutionaries to seize power, while the Mensheviks supported a larger, more inclusive party and a gradual democratic transition to socialism. The Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, believed in a direct, forceful revolution, whereas the Mensheviks, led by Martov, were willing to work with liberal parties and thought a bourgeois revolution was a necessary step before a socialist one could occur. Interesting. Look at, you know, politics has never been my thing, but it is interesting to just kind of read these little blurbs about, you know, political stuff from, you know, I mean, we're talking like, what, 120 years ago? 125 years ago? It's kind of interesting stuff. Okay. Now, jumping back, we're rolling back to the neons, and what Eileen has in her book, I'm struggling a little bit. I don't know that these are neons. The date period is right. The colors seem right to me, at least this blue one. This one is really interesting, but I don't think that's a neon. I don't think that qualifies. You know, these just have a little, the colors are here. Maybe this one. But I think that with the addition of other colors, then it maybe becomes not neon. I don't know. You know, is it still a neon if it has other colors in it? Like this one has got that bright purpley periwinkle blue, but then it's got this brown and yellow. So does that negate that neonishness? Now this one, that says neon to me. I think that's a neon. There's some other interesting ones in here that, this this branchy kind of stuff, look at it. You see it all over the place in this era, this period. I don't know, for some reason I always think of it as coral or seaweed, but it could be any kind of branches, like a bush or a tree or whatever. Um, so, and then here is Eileen's documentation of the conversation prints. So she's got horse and horseshoes, dominoes, which we hadn't seen before, a frog. I've seen the frog before. So very cute. She also has this beautiful paisley, which kind of has some of these neon-y kind of things going on. So, question mark. Is it a neon if it's got those colors but other stuff? I think not, but I don't know. And then down here, then we have these other. So this looks like a postman mailing a letter. Here's the dogs. The dogs again. And this one's my favorite. The fly. I would do anything to find some of this fabric. So if you ever see it, let me know. Oh gosh, and you know what? You guys probably can't see it very well because let me move the chat just a little bit for a second so you can see this. Isn't it cool? It's a dang housefly. And it's got like little dots around it. So like little fly specks. I don't know. You know, going back to like this period of time, you know, if you roll it back a little bit into the 19th century, 1880s, very Victorian. They loved weird stuff, right? I feel like this is one of those. Okay. Ooh, Druid's got even more detail for us. Okay. So we talked about the Menshevik. So communism has impacted, oh, this is cool. Communism has impacted textile fabrics through both labor organizing and state-sponsored design. Communist parties organized and supported textile workers during strikes, while some communist regimes used fabric and fashion as propaganda tools to promote ideology and modernization through designs, incorporating state symbols and industrial imagery. So some of those, like, okay, let's go back here. And I'm not saying that this is communist fabric or anything, but shoot, where is it? Where'd it go? That looks a little hammerish, hammer and sickle-ish without the sickle. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so she goes on to say, on the other hand, some communist regimes have been blamed for near total destruction of traditional artisanal textile production, such as Cambodian silk weaving. Okay, yeah. So you've got, yeah, I would say that, you know, the communism in my lifetime, and I would say that, like, many of you are my age, a bit older, you know, we lived through the fall of the Berlin Wall, and you know, the change from the Iron Curtain to this more friendly relationship with Russia. But then, you know, in my child's lifetime, we have formed a not very good relationship with Russia, I think. You know, from a diplomatic standpoint, one wonders. So yeah, these are some interesting things to think about. You know, I think that the idea of communism and socialism in 2025 is very different than the way that we viewed it in the 90s, the 80s, and before. You know, the Cold War, you know, my mother, my parents lived through, you know, the deep Cold War of the 50s and 60s. So this is all very interesting stuff. You know, we hear the big headlines. You know, we look at the big geopolitical stuff as what we learn in school. And I don't know what the kids are learning today about this stuff. It's interesting, though, to really look at kind of boots on the ground kind of stuff. And, you know, as this example that Drew had found of Cambodian silk weaving, you know, I know communism kind of can improve things because, you know, communism, like kind of the ideals of socialism is that, you know, all people are equal. So there were lots of, under communist rule, like say in Afghanistan, there were lots of opportunities for women. You know, women could go to school, you know, take up professions, and, you know, that is all, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like that's all thumbs up in under communist, you know, socialist and communist rule. Whereas like tradition and anything that's kind of smacks of like, you know, kind of the village, the idea of like these old like folk ways of life, that kind of gets erased under communism. If you know, so I'm not a very good speaker of historical things, I guess. So you guys correct me if I'm wrong about any of this stuff, or if you have a different viewpoint on it. Okay, so moving along. Now, Brackman. So this is for Brackman. This is the fly again, but it looks different. So look at this one. You still got the dots, you've got the fly, but it looks different than this one. This one's to me, a lot more lifelike. And what I'm wondering is this a different printing technology? You know, the fly is kind of like a little wispy, you know, on its backside, you know, kind of just like a fly has like little hairs on its abdomen and kind of on its back. This kind of gives you that look, whereas this one is more of like a almost silk screened, you know, like very blocky kind of look. And obviously the design being different, but is the design such because the print, like the printing technology was different? I keep thinking about these French steel engravings, how those might be different as a printing technology from just your traditional, or traditional now. Back then it was more cutting edge, but the different roller prints. And again, I think they're brass. I think early ones are wood, just to mention that. Okay, so now we're looking at my stuff. And as I was digging through my box of I have some antique fabrics, a lot of vintage fabrics, bicentennial fabrics. I have a whole bunch of different things. And I actually surprised myself when I realized I had more stuff than I thought I did. This quilt happened to be folded up beside the plastic box. I have a kind of a stack of quilts that I need to rotate into my my storage unit. And this happens to be one of them. This is probably turn of the century. This fabric here, I consider to be kind of a conversation print. It is also, I think, an indigo. I didn't go into the indigo chapter in the Calico Man book, but he had a really robust set of indigo prints that I think can really tell you like what is indigo and what might be something else. But I'm pretty sure this is indigo, but it's also kind of a conversation print. Even though I think we've established the conversation prints are mostly black and red. So this one I thought might be a conversation print, but I'm not sure. This one kind of like skirts the line between conversation and shirting, and it may very well be neither. You know, just in terms of what art kind of gets assigned. But I mean, look in here. You've got this itty bitty little piece there. It's almost like it's not really like a lightning bolt, but kind of. When I grabbed this quilt and I kind of threw it on my couch and kind of took some pictures of parts of it, I thought to myself, this quilt, I think I need to not put it in storage. I think I need to photograph it in detail and identify the fabrics in here. Now, what I'm going to show you next is not, I think it's next, is not neon, convo, or a shirting. This is that, remember when, and oh, look at these. You've got some more little, there's that lightning boltish thing, and then you've got another little crescent and star, tiny, tiny. But this burgundy, remember when we read chapter 4 of Brackman, Clues in the Calico, that color of red, that burgundy, claret, kind of a wine color, is very indicative of 1880s. This is when they have the technology to do that color versus turkey red or the alizarin, remember? So I was really excited when I saw that. I was like, we just talked about this the other day. So here, this fabric, I find this a lot. It is just a lovely little star print. And I think that this might be indigo. I'm not sure, but it definitely falls in the kind of a conversation category, I think, even though like conversation prints, and I'm getting ready to show you some from my collection that are definitely 100% according to the officials are conversation prints. There's also one that's like is it 6-pointed, 8-pointed? It looks more like an asterisk than an actual star. But, oops. I just realized this one over here. Look at that. They look like little pins, maybe. I'm not sure. So this quilt here is definitely like the time period we're talking about, but it's conversation prints and shirtings. There are no neons in this quilt. It's all mostly red, blue, and white, and then there's some browns in there. Got a lot of plaids. So when I first saw this, I struggled. I wasn't sure. But then as I talked to other people and as I've looked at different things in it, and I'm still finding new things because this thing is like crazy. There's lots of stuff all over this quilt. I'm suddenly like looking at things and I'm like, I know what that is. I know what that is. So I'm starting to feel a little better about my ability to date things. I'm learning, you guys. Oh, hey, Padma. So Padma says, oops, mail crud. Hi, I'm into the star prints. One in my 1880s quote. What are we looking at? So we're looking at neons, conversation prints, and shirtings. So this is a quilt that I have in my collection. And it doesn't have any neons, but it does have conversation and shirtings. Oh, I must have taken 2 pictures. Okay, you guys have seen this before, and now I'm rolling back into neons. So this is the quilt, little quilted piece that I won at seminar this year. And this is made by a member of one of the guilds. I'm assuming it was the guild where a lot of our AQSG members belong to. And they coordinated the making of these as prizes. They're table toppers. They're in our big room. And I was lucky enough to be able to get this. Quiltish had a star in the 90s with that star print. I did too. I had a top and a skirt, and it was from the Gap in the 90s. So I'd assume, like, not saying yours is from the Gap, but I think that was popular in the 1990s, that little star print. I see it all the time in quilts, and I think it's a good it's a good signpost of the 1880s to probably the 1920s, but it goes along with those shirting prints, I think. So this, of course, this piece is all reproduction fabrics, and I struggled between, because they gave me a choice of which one I could take. I struggled between this one and this other one that had a lot of greens in it. And I still am glad I took this one, but I keep thinking about that green one, and I wish I had taken a picture of it because it had some cool prints in it too. But the reason I want to show this one is the circle in the middle. I think this is a reproduction neon print. You see, you've got that bright pink. You've got this, it's verging on red. It's essentially red, like a fuchsia. Now you have these little dots. Now when these little dots come from a roller printed fabric, it's called picotage. So when you're talking about the wooden rollers, they're printing earlier fabrics than this. I'm not saying that's how this was made. If obviously this is a reproduction, but if this were a period fabric, I'm not saying that's how they printed this, but when you go back to some of the block printed and the wooden roller printed, like the chintzes, these little clusters of dots were made by, they literally took little tiny like nails and hammered them into the roller prints. And then I think you'd also kind of see them in the block prints too. I think they'd hammer them in there too. So that's an interesting aspect of printing that, I think kind of was sustained. You can see this like little dotty background stuff in a lot of these fabrics, these reproductions. So I think it kind of became like they did it in the early days, and then I think fabric designers went, well, it kind of looks good, when we do that. So, I guess as they made these more modern types of printing technology, you would get, they included this. So Quiltish made her shirt. So, I'm guessing then they had that star print yardage in the 90s. The 90s are full of reproductions too, so it's no surprise to me that star print was out there. I have a pillowcase that I actually deconstructed. It came from a family friend, that has the star print. It's a little bit larger, but it's from the 70s. It was bedding from the 70s. So it's really interesting how you get these things that come up, right? And it's without connections, and being able to look at all these things and make the connections, like, yeah, bacterias and amoebas, exactly. This always reminds me like of just underwater, like coral and sponges and things, seaweeds and such. Okay, this neon. I purchased this from a dealer, and it's been a while ago, but this was billed as a neon. And here I have it. It's not a terribly large piece. I think it's probably like essentially a fat quarter. It still has glaze on it, but it is cotton. It's very pretty fabric. But what like you're seeing here again, this like really periwinkly purple, and it's not ombre, but with those colors stacked up beside each other, as you pull back from it, it's really got that like, it's like a glow almost. And I think that's maybe why they call it neon. So the era for this one would be 1880s, 1890s. This fabric, and it still has this little ticket. This probably was the end of the bolt, and it still has this little label on it. But the little label doesn't really tell us anything. So apparently there was 62 yards, maybe, or six. Yeah, I think it's 62 yards. So this maybe came right out of the factory. I don't know. All right. Now we're getting to my conversation prints. I'm sorry, my shirtings. And then we'll get to my conversation prints. So these are shirtings. And here we have right here. Here's that little 6-pointed star. And sometimes you see this where the backing is blue and the star itself is in white. And then look at these other ones. These just little tiny little design elements, but it's a sheer fabric. It's a finer fabric, say, than some of our others. Like for instance, this one is a thin fabric, but it's more tightly woven, and it's got a little more body, I think, than these. These are more fine. Today, if we were to get, buy this type of stuff in a store that was selling, garment clothing, they would probably call this like a tissue weight or a lawn. It's not exactly the same, but it is an even weave. It's just a fine, lightweight, kind of diaphanous. But when I see fabrics like these two at the top left, top right, and also this bottom right, those scream to me shirtings when they're this thin. And what did I just do with it? So I also have 2 reproduction shirtings that I just happened to grab. I couldn't find I have ones that are black and gray that are more like these here. I couldn't find them. I think they're in my project bag upstairs, because I'm actually working on a quilt that uses these. So let me jump back to my main me. So these are some shirting reproductions. This one's like a blue, and then this one I think is even more shirting-esque, and it is green. But I did find this one in a different colorway. This is by it's just called Viridians by Cheryl Johnson of Temecula Quilt Company. Marcus Fabrics. So I did get this in Temecula, California. So yeah, let's see, Vintage Viridians is what she's called it. And then this one, the blue one, is this blue one is by Moda. Oh goodness, this is a long one. Florence's Fancy, 1860 to 1900, by Betsy Kuchian. Moda. So is there a date on this? I don't think either of these have a date. Oh, there's a little quote by Charles Dickens. Have a heart that never hardens and a touch that never hurts. Charles Dickens. And this one's called Trellis Vine. So this one may or may not really be a shirting, you know. I kind of think it is, though. I think it's a reproduction of a shirting. So those. Let me go back to my screen. Now, here are my conversation prints. And I purchased these from a well-known dealer who knows what it is she is speaking of. So, you know, I trusted her to tell me that these were indeed conversation prints. And here you see horses and horseshoes, anchors. This one's interesting because it's tennis and cricket. That's a cricket bat, right? And what I would think this ball is probably, or this little circle is maybe like supposed to be a tennis ball, and this is maybe supposed to be a cricket ball. All right, Padma the reds. Yeah, these are very nice reds. So this one, so the one that is behind, that is here on the tennis racket and cricket bat, is more of that burgundy, whereas these are that, like, or at least these two, the anchor and the center crescent moon, they're that like bright sort of cherry red, kind of turkey red print. But these two in the corners, especially the one with the bat, those are veering over into that like sort of claret burgundy-ish red. They've got that tint. So that's interesting to look at. But this crescent moon thing, you keep seeing this come up, the crescent moon with the star. And I mean, here's another version of it that kind of has these little, I don't know, I guess they're little arrows. So really interesting stuff. And these are period. And I didn't have dates on these, but looking at these books, 1890s. And these, I think, particularly these two on the left-hand side, I mean, look, if this isn't a neon, I don't know what is. Because look at it. It's got that almost ombre-like effect by layering the light color over the dark color. It's got those little kind of seaweedy coral branches. And then down here, you kind of got the same thing going on. You've even got this like electric current kind of thing going on. Now, these in the center also have these like brilliant pinks. But like I said, when you're including like yet another color, like this third color, that's not white. So like this third color is, or fourth color is green. And then here you've got this yellow. Like, is it still a neon? I don't know, you guys. Like, I wish I had somebody here that could like be like, no, Stephanie, you don't know what you're talking about. Or yes, Stephanie, you're absolutely right. Right? Snowflake amoeba. Yes, they are. They're snowflakey and amoeba-like. And you start to wonder, like, kind of what were they looking at, or what was in their consciousness to, you know, inspire them to do these designs. Obviously, this one down here is so very floral. And you've got kind of a whole history of floral prints, all the way back to the chintzes that kind of, I feel like, inspired this. But these, is it scientific, scientific research? I mean, this is the time period we do have some like major medical research and medical discoveries going on, Civil War on. I would say that the last quarter of the 19th century and then the early 20th century had a lot going on, penicillin and all that kind of stuff. So maybe that's like in the zeitgeist. I don't know. It's interesting. Okay, back to me. And I have a couple there to show you. So this, I already showed you this one, sort of. But this is the cute little dogs. And it is clearly a take on the reproductions, the conversation prints. But if you look at it, it's a very, very simple dog. It looks very different than the dogs that we were seeing in those examples of the period prints. They had a lot more detail. Again, that I feel like that steel engraving, that French steel engraving stuff, that technology, you could get much finer detailed, like almost like fur and facial detail and stuff that you're just not going to get with these more modern technologies. Now this one, I think that this has also a different, like a more complex history than just this is a conversation print reproduction because of this bear specifically as a subject, but this still gives me those reproduction or those conversation print vibes, and this is a reproduction fabric. Let me see it. This one still has the, when you buy fat quarters, sometimes you luck out. No, that does not have the, I think neither of these has the selvage. Oh wait, this one, no, of course. The dogs have the selvage, but it only has a little tiny remnant of the information. That makes me crazy. Anyway, all right. Have I showed you everything in my little stack here? I think I have. I dropped some of my conversation prints. Yeah, so these were exciting. I kind of forgotten that I had these. I sort of bought them on a whim. When I was at an event where a well-known quilt dealer was there, and she had like kind of a big basket of these things. 6 little swatches of antique fabric for whatever. And like I said, I got this one off of eBay from a pretty well-known antiques dealer who has since, I think they might still be selling online, but they pretty much liquidated their inventory of other things like quilts. So, all right, I think that's everything. I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to look at today. And I mean, I've come to some conclusions. I don't know how you guys feel about my conclusions. If you are like, I think you're onto something there, Stephanie. with the neons. I know what I know about at least conversation prints. And I think for the most part, shirtings, I think I'm pretty good on those. But this mystery of the neon print, I mean, it really has frustrated me. And I'm not trying to disparage anybody I've talked to, but I just feel like when I've talked to the people that know, like, why do you know that this is a neon print? What is it? Right, Padma? I had never heard of a neon print until really this year. It was early this year. I was at a retreat. I was at the retreat in Temecula, and one of the folks there, and she's very knowledgeable about dating fabrics, and she was mentioning a few things to me that I did know, and it was interesting to hear more from her perspective. But then she says the neons, and I'm like, tell me about neons. And what she told me was, 1890s, they're, these very bright on black, but that is all she said. And like I said, everyone that I've asked since is just like, well, yeah, I mean, like, that's a neon print. And I'm like, but how do you know? Where do you find this information? And they are simply not called neons from what I have researched thus far. At least from these 3 books. And I realize, like I said at the top of the show, these 3 books are not the last word in this, but they're just the ones I have in my library. And so, like I said, if you guys know of any others that, might have a good range of detail and information, or, if there's, and I'm definitely going to try and look at some of the textbooks, and there's a couple of like textile, they're more on the textbook range of like this kind of stuff. They have lots of pictures, but these are like books that they're textbooks, so they're pricey. And so I'm gonna have to do like some interlibrary loans, I think, to get my hands on them. That's a beautiful thing. I don't know if you guys have ever done an interlibrary loan, but it is a wonderful thing that you are able to do. And as I mentioned, this one particular book that I'm looking, I want to look at because of some other research I'm doing. It's a book that, again, it's a textbook. So it's like when I looked at just like getting a copy of it, because, I'm willing to pay a little bit of money for a book that, I see myself referencing a lot. I will buy, a little bit more expensive book, but always used. I 90% of the time, unless it's a brand new, recently published by a friend or colleague, I generally don't buy books new, just because like the used book market is enormous. And I think that, it's just ecologically conscious to try to snap up used books when you can. But anyway, this book and it's a handbook of textile and culture, I think is what it's called. And it costs like, I think just to buy it used, it's the cheapest price I found was $150. So I mean, I paid that much, or around that much, I think, for my Dunton book. And that's a rare book. Only so many copies available. So anyway, long story short, I started looking for the book. I can do an interlibrary loan here in Maryland. But when I was in New York, I thought, if the public library has it, I can at least look at it and kind of page through and see, like the table of contents and such. Every library in New York associated with the university had the book, but they did not have it at the New York Public Library. So, Padma, yeah. So Making History, Quilts and Fabric from 1890 to 1970. Do I have that? Let me look that up real quick. I don't know if I have that book. I have to see the... Let us find it. Brackman has published so many books, and what I would also say is her website or her blog, she has several blogs. Oh, yes, I do have this book. I'm going to have to dig around and pull this out because I have this book, I'm pretty sure. So thank you for reminding me of this, Padma. Another good one is America's Printed Fabrics, 1770 to 1890. I'm pretty sure I have that one too. Is that Brackman? Yeah, that's a Brackman one too. Here's the thing about Brackman, and I don't mean this in any way, but her books are maybe not necessarily picture heavy. They're very text heavy and like fantastic information, but you don't necessarily like, again, as an example, The Calico Man. This book is just pages and pages of pictures. Whereas Brackman is, you got a lot of pictures, but you also have pages and pages of text. So you have a lot more to read in here than you do with like the catalog type stuff like Calico Man and Eileen Tristane. So, okay. I don't know that we came to any like really hard and fast conclusions, but my quest to learn about neon fabrics continues. So, Yeah, and I'll dig around on my stuff. Like, I'm kind of kicking myself that I forgot about those two Brackman books. But again, I don't know that they're necessarily like the really good, strong, like, catalog of pictures that I'm really craving. And there just may not be anything like that. You know, you kind of have to kind of put it all together. I mean, I think about, remember the dress diary? If any of you were reading along with me and Jill on the dress diary, there was a lot of fabric swatches in that book, pictures, that surprised me that they were from, you know, the 1840s. They were dress fabrics. A lot of those were silk, so they wouldn't have necessarily been in quilts. But, you know, the imagery, you know, you've got the imagery of the period. So, all right. Let's read some Mavis. I am feeling my Mavis oats right now. I think we can get through the next chapter. I think it's chapter 7 for sure. Let me just move my screen around again. Okay. So I don't think this chapter has a lot of pictures in it, but bear with me while I move things around. Okay. This over here. Okay. So we're on chapter 7. And as a reminder, we are reading Traditional Quilting by Mavis Fitz-Randolph, published in 1954. And we're on chapter 7, and this one's called The Uses of Quilting. And as a reminder, Mavis is writing about the quilts of England, but specifically, all of the stuff she talks about comes from Wales and Northern England. So, you know, and I, you know, for lack of really better kind of understanding, I think it's because these are just like the locus of a lot of quilts during the periods she's talking about. Like the quilting culture and community was very alive and well in these areas. So that is why I think she has that focus. Now, after we read Mavis, I do want to move on to English quilting, Old and New by Elizabeth Hake, because Mavis references this book a lot. She also references Florence Peto quite a bit, and of course we've read Florence Peto's books. So, you know, just for lack of any other commentary, I really have enjoyed Mavis. I think that you know, she's had some funny things to say. I think we can all appreciate her humor or her distaste for certain things, but I think she's a pretty good writer. So, okay. Chapter 7, The Uses of Quilting. And from what I have gathered, at least just looking at the very first page of this chapter, we're going to get into the stuff that Avril Colby spent an unusually lengthy amount of time on. So the other things that are quilted, such as clothing. And I think that this is a short chapter. I think that Mavis Fitz-Randolph is probably going to handle it in a better way than Avril Colby. Avril Colby went into it like ad nauseum, chapters and chapters about doublets and armor and all that stuff. And I think that we're going to like the way Mavis covers it. So, without ado, Traditional Quilting by Mavis Fitz-Randolph, 1954, Chapter 7, The Uses of Quilting. By the end of the 18th century, quilted garments were no longer seen in the world of fashion. Fine ladies no longer displayed a full quilted petticoat beneath an open skirt, and their cavaliers were no longer splendid in quilted waistcoats, doublets and hose, not stockings, but straight, closely fitted knickers. And so the hose of ancient periods are they are very closely made, but they're cut on the bias, so they're a little stretchy. This is something interesting that, again, like she brings up stuff that like takes me back to historical costuming. So, but not all of these things disappeared entirely. Some of them merely moved down in the social scale. I would say in the U.S., 18th century, we still have quilted petticoats, definitely, and quilted waistcoats or bodices to some degree, I think. Some of them merely moved down the social scale. Petticoats or skirts in particular were worn throughout the 19th century by fisherwomen along the northeast coast, by country women, certainly in County Durham, Northumberland, and Westmoreland, and probably other counties in the north and also in South Wales. It's probably colder in these areas, by the way, right? I have heard of men's waistcoats quilted on fine black cashmere being worn in Cardiganshire and the north of Pembrokeshire, though I have not seen these. Several Welsh quilters now living have in their youth quilted petticoats. So this being 1954, if she's talking to some older ladies, they could have been born mid 1800s at the earliest. I mean, she would have to be talking to a very elderly woman. So this is interesting. So in their youth, quilted petticoats, usually black, of satin, merino, or alpaca. Mrs. Godfrey remembered that black wadding was used to pad them. So we're guessing for black sheep. Mrs. Evans of, Lanristed, Welsh, double L's all over the place, of this town, knew of them interlined with flannel. Many others spoke of these petticoats. Their mothers had worn them or their grannies, but for a long time I could not find one, and when I asked what had happened to them, I was told that they had all gone underground. This was meant literally. It was the ambition of every respectable woman to be buried in a black satin quilted petticoat. Interesting. A Carmarthenshire woman who used to quilt them and who also laid out the corpses described how these were clothed above the waist in white cotton wool snatched with the scissors like flowers, and had white woolen stockings specially knitted on their feet. They were going off very smart. That's interesting. I mean, I kind of look at fine clothes on a corpse as, if you're having an open casket and a viewing and a wake and all that stuff, dress up your corpses. But I mean, when you toss them in the hole, really? Do they really need all this finery? Couldn't somebody else use the fine clothes? I don't know. There were a few of these petticoats in the Welsh Folk Museum, and I discovered a few more after prolonged search. The oldest ones seem to have been made, as the 18th century underskirts were, of straight widths, which were put onto the waistband in flat folds. These, and the North Country ones also, were thinly padded and sometimes quilted all the way up, or more often to within a few inches of the waist, and some had a scalloped edge. So typically the way these were made, at least the ones I've seen in the U.S., and there's a number of them up in New England and in several different historic sites, but basically they were a long strip. And occasionally I think I've seen something that may have been a little bit shaped, kind of a little bit of a curve. But essentially they were kind of straight things. And then the top of them was folded kind of like a kilt, like the way you pleat a kilt, with the wide flat pleats. And then those would be held down by either a waistband or more likely another piece of fabric. Probably similar fabric to what the actual quilted part was made out of, but not quilted, just that piece of fabric that stretched several inches, maybe 6 or 8 inches between the waistband and the quilted part itself. So you kind of got this this piece. That's what I've seen. And then again, this is in museums. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to examine one hands-on, but I've seen them in museums. So that's what she's talking about. The Welsh patterns were generally simple. There may be only diamonds or perhaps a border with diamonds above, but some were more elaborate. Twist, leaves, stars, and prints of whales' feathers were seen on one. The village of Langwam, another Welsh double L thing, seems to have had its own style in petticoats of 2 layers of flannel, red and black, quilted together, which are said to have been worn by all the women there. Interesting. I've also seen pictures, and I want to say it's up in the Hebrides, which are the islands up maybe the North Sea, and the women there, because it was it's an island that gets a lot of wind and it's very cold and it's ocean, northern cold ocean stuff, they wore these like heavy flannel petticoats. And I can't remember what book. We may have actually looked at it here. I don't think it was this book. What was the last book we read? It might have been in the last book we read. Anyway. In the north of England, quilted petticoats seem to have been generally worn by country women up to about 1900. Some people still have them. Some of the older quilters wore them in their girlhood, and many remember that their mothers made them. Mrs. Hope's mother quilted petticoats before ever she learned to set up a large quilt in the frame. Each strip of a petticoat could be set up complete, and when, on being widowed in 1887, she formed a club and started on her first quilt. She did not know how to manage a piece of work this size. Her daughter remembers with amusement how the two covers were spread out on the floor and all the padding laid in at once. Well, I mean, really, like a quilt frame, in theory, you could quilt a petticoat on a quilt frame. Have most of it, I think, out at the same time, depending on how deep your frame is. Like, I think if you have a frame where kind of a deep frame, because the width is like the width of the quilt, but a fairly deep frame that maybe is intended for quilters to be on either side of, then I think you could get a length of petticoat done, like all in one like layout. Whereas, for instance, a quilt frame I saw when I was up in Portland, Maine, it was very shallow. Like, it was probably only, I don't know, like 20 inches. Like, it wasn't like very deep, and it was kind of like, as a single quilter, you could reach all the way to the other side of it. So I think like it really depends on how deep the quilting frame would be. But it kind of surprises me, if she can quilt a petticoat, why does it confuse her about how the quilt works? Anecdotal. Strip patterns such as worm and twist were commonly used in North Country petticoats, running round them, or even plain straight lines in the same direction, or the stiff angular diamonds. Now, we see this also in petticoats here in the U.S. The diamonds are usually like kind of a fill pattern, and it's down at the bottom that you might see like the more interesting stuff. Lynn Bassett, who is an independent researcher, I respect very much. Her research is impeccable. She has done like the deepest of deep dives into a set of petticoats that were, I think, worn by wives and daughters of wealthy shipping guys, like, you know, early 19th century, maybe late 1700s. And they have things like mermaids and ships and all kinds of cool stuff on them, animals, all kinds of cool stuff. But it's typically like the bottom section of the petticoat. And then as you go up towards the top, it's really just like a diamond pattern, a grid pattern that just kind of fills in. The idea seems to have been to emphasize the bulk of the garment rather than to attempt any suggestion of gracefulness. Many petticoats were of white cotton. I saw a very gay one of red cotton print in the paisley colors. Homespun was the material favored by former generations in one farmhouse. Black sateen, satin, or silk were also used. And the ones I've seen were silk. They were definitely for fancy ladies. Mrs. Forrest's mother sometimes made them from old black silk umbrellas. What? Silk umbrellas? Now that's interesting. That'd have to be a pretty big umbrella, I think, to get, you know, I mean, maybe for a child or a younger lady who was shorter and perhaps not very girthy. Mrs. English remembers that when she was a child living in a farmhouse near Rothbury, two single women who lived together in a cottage nearby wore quilted working out skirts of gray stuff, which is usually wool, is what she means, when they were working out in the fields. And a Westmoreland woman said that her mother wore a skirt quilted in diamond pattern round the lower part. The date in both cases would be about 1900. In some photographs of fisher folk taken at Staithes and Whitby, about 1870, many of the women are wearing quilted skirts, apparently of woolen stuff, in quite elaborate patterns, which cannot be clearly seen, though a chain is distinguishable. I am told that they were worn at color coats, that's Cullercoats, within fairly recent times, probably the first 30 years of this century, and were of navy blue serge. Oh, interesting. Now, that's what I'm thinking, like, was there a picture? Let's see. I'm going to scroll up real quick. Let's see, we're on page 145. Yes. Yes. This is definitely where we saw this. So this is Muscle Gatherers at Brunswick. I'm just going to scoot this over real quick so you guys can see. This is where I remember seeing this picture of these women wearing these petticoats. And this is, I don't know where Brunswick is, but I know I've definitely seen other types of pictures of women in these fishing villages, like up in, North Sea, northern parts of that area. And you can imagine, like, the wind coming off the sea, you would certainly appreciate, I think, some woolen stockings and a quilted petticoat. An old lady in County Durham who quilted her own petticoats was quilting stays for her grandchildren toward the end of the last century. So, if you didn't know, a stay is kind of like a corset, but not really. It's more of like a sort of buttoned or laced into it, and it's just kind of like a foundation garment that's not like really cinching you in. It doesn't necessarily have like boning or anything in it. It's just kind of a tight sort of thing to keep you cinched in, kind of like a brassiere of today, but longer. One can picture these garments as similar to the quilted linen bodices of the 17th century in the Victoria and Albert Museum. An Elizabethan lady had a damask quilted bodice, which they call them bodies because it's a bodice, but there's two parts to it. Damask quilt bodies with whalebones, and quilted nightcaps were in favor at that time. So that would have been like, she's talking about like 1600s, early 17th century. Babies' bonnets of white cotton, thinly padded, have been heard of in Wales. North Country babies slept snug under cradle quilts, made big enough to tuck in. Less was heard of these in Wales, though a Cardiganshire woman wrote that they were in use in her district as far back as the oldest inhabitant can remember, and her own grandmother used them to bring up her family of 12. These were usually of brightly colored stamp, cotton print is what she has in parentheses, sometimes with frills. In the north of England, they were often of alternating strips of plain material and patchwork, or strips of print in two colors, such as pink and lilac. A white one with the patchwork basket pattern in red, and another of brick pattern patchwork in red and cream were mentioned in Weardale. Mrs. Hitchcock's mother made them of the narrow strips of material left over from quilts. One which I saw in Yorkshire had been made originally for the father of the present elderly owners, and was later used on their cradles and finally for their dolls. It was of print patchwork quilted in a simple ring pattern. And in a ring pattern, I'm kind of going to guess that it's the circles, the overlapping circles, so like a teacup or a wine glass quilting. Since about 1770, big quilts, large enough to cover a double bed, have been the chief output of traditional quilters, with petticoats and skirts probably ranking next in importance until about 1900, and cradle quilts and other small things being made only occasionally. From 1900 until about 1930, the large quilts were almost the only pieces of work to be set up in the quilting frames. I would think like even small things like a crib quilt or baby bonnets and stuff they would have to quilt those in something very small. Like it doesn't make sense to set up a whole quilting frame unless they quilted a piece of fabric and cut them out. I don't know. When the Rural Industries Bureau began to organize a market for quilted work, there was at once a demand for smaller quilts and for cot quilts. The traditional patterns were easily adapted to single bed quilts, even in County Durham, where the workers were inclined to keep more rigidly to a traditional formula. They did not find it difficult to plan certain designs on a narrower scale. The length of the quilt was about the same as before, but cot quilts were a more awkward problem. Even the memory of cradle quilts did not help much because the simple strip patterns did not appeal to London customers. The usual pattern units had to be reduced in size and the designs simplified. So I'm guessing when she talks about like cot quilts, that's for like a single bed. So like a bed for a single person. And my guess is there's, in London, in the city, you've probably got lots more single people living, that are looking for bedding than you would out in the country where you've got these large families. Before long, these problems were solved, and then cushions were demanded. Pillowcases were certainly quilted in the 17th and 18th centuries. There is one in the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is illustrated in their notes on quilting. But they seem to have dropped from the quilter's repertory long ago. It was the Durham workers who succeeded best with them. Some of their graceful feather patterns could be arranged very effectively in a small square or rectangle and were particularly good on a round cushion. The Welsh genius for design seems to flourish better in larger spaces. It has been pointed out that to quilt a cushion cover, it is to misuse a craft which was primarily intended to produce a warm covering. One of the characteristic features of which is that both sides are right sides. This is quite true, but pillow covers have been quilted in the past, and quilted cushion covers can be beautifully decorative. For obvious practical reasons, they are popular pieces of work for beginners or for amateurs who only want to quilt for their own use or for presents to friends and may have difficulty in accommodating a large frame. Quilted garments of more elegance than the stiff, capacious petticoats of the last century came again into fashion from about 1920. Although a few orders for narrow-shaped petticoats for long coats and evening cloaks were passed on to the quilters from wholesale dressmaking firms, these were only passing fashions. But dressing gowns or house gowns and dressing jackets were soon in great demand and have remained popular. If you guys remember those beautiful little bed jackets and dressing gowns, remember those were from the war years, so like the 30s and 40s. I took pictures of those at Festival of Quilts in Birmingham. That's exactly what she's talking about, is those, because those are recent to her time period. Quilting is ideal for these garments, making them warm yet light, especially if a thin wool padding is used, and beautiful. The problem of how to quilt the shaped pieces in a frame, which will hold only a rectangular piece of work, was easily solved by chalking on the material the outline of each part of the garment and cutting it out only after the quilting was done. Okay. That's what I was thinking, but I still think something small like a baby bonnet, that's got to be done in like a handheld frame. That can't possibly be done it would be a waste, I think. But the problem of designing suitable patterns for these garments was not so easily solved, and there are still very few quilters who could be relied upon to do it successfully. Their grandmother's petticoats, with their patterns running uncompromisingly around, do not help. But surely the answer is to be found in those lovely garments worn by the ladies of the 18th century. Although the skirts were wide and rather stiff, the patterns were essentially elegant. The typical one on the scrap of Northumbrian work, which we've already looked at early on, suggests a pattern of the right kind, which any skilled North Country quilter could devise for her usual templates, with a new one for the rigs. I don't know. She's got RIGS, and it's in italics, so I'm not sure what she means. Both English and Welsh quilters have become so accustomed to designing for quilts, which are to be seen as a rectangular surface spread out flat, that they do not easily adjust their ideas to the quite different style of design, which is to be seen only in parts at a time, draped around the human form. For instance, pairs of wavy patterns, such as running feathers or bellows, can look quite ludicrously inappropriate. Diamonds are rather too stiff and angular. Large roses or fans look lumpy. One exquisite petticoat pattern shown in the Victoria and Albert Museum's Notes on Quilting gives another suggestion. And there are many more petticoats in the museum which could be studied, as well as a charming Devon one shown in 2 plates in Mrs. Hake's book, which we will eventually get to see. And that is the end of that chapter. So why don't we look really quickly at Mrs. Hake's book and see what she's talking about. This is a very, very short book. So, yep, here we go. Let me switch over so I can hold this up. So this is what she's talking about out of Elizabeth Hake's book. And of course, unfortunately, black and white pictures, you can only see but so much. But these look very pretty, especially the one on the left-hand side. Oh, actually, I think it's the same petticoat, just shown different. Yeah, I think it's showing the back, maybe the back and the front of it. So this says a silk quilted petticoat, Devon, circa 1789. Note the naturalistic tendency in design. So we look at it again, especially this image of it. You can really see because they flattened it out some. Very pretty. Like, this is the kind of thing that I'm thinking of, like that's the well-off women here in the U.S. had access to, and that you might see in a museum. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting pictures in this book, even though they're. Oh, look, here's some cushions. Yeah, so that's funny. I never thought about, I've always looked at like a quilted pillow. I mean, even today, as being something that, like a person who is just getting started or just doesn't have time to make a full-blown quilt, but still wants to, make a quilty thing, make it into a pillow. That's what they tell you, make a pillow or make, some other kind of small item. A pillow is certainly more useful from a decorative sense than a wall hanging, I think. I mean, a pillow on a couch, I think, it has a little bit more use. But I never thought of it as kind of the mindset of, well, it's a waste. It's a waste of time. I never really thought about it that way. When you've got something that is meant for warmth. Here's a jacket. That's a pretty cool looking jacket. I like it. It's got a cut like a blazer. So this says dressing jacket, Northumberland in Shanghai silk, by courtesy of the Rural Industries Bureau. So yeah, we'll be getting into this one soon. Yeah, this one seems like a very good book, even though it's very thin little book. Okay. Well, you guys, that's what I had today for you. Next week, I will be showing you the exhibit at FIT. And like I said, I'm going to break it into 2 because they kind of broke it into 2. Again, what that exhibit was about was psychoanalysis and fashion. And so I know some of you are going to love the first part of it because it's antique clothing. So you've got, beautiful antique dresses and, turn of the century tuxedo, I remember I saw, and just some really interesting like accessories. But then we go into the second part of the exhibit, and it's a lot of modern fashion. And so you've got all of the major fashion designers. I personally love Alexander McQueen and his stuff. So there's like a whole display of Alexander McQueen stuff. And, all of the other ones that why am I blanking? Comme des Garçons and Prada and Gautier. Gautier made some like really crazy stuff that shows up hardcore in this exhibit. So, just imagine the things that Freud talked about in his psychoanalysis. That's where they're looking at how these concepts show up in fashion. and in society as it pertains to these fashions. So I'll probably have to put a content warning because it's not like there's nothing that is overtly in terms of imagery overtly sexual, but some of what they talk about is so, and I want to be able to read the placards too, so we're probably gonna have to put a content warning on it so I don't get I don't talk about sex and violence and things like in a crude way. I talk about it from the perspective of art, and I don't want to get censored. It like really bothers me to get censored. So I've only been censored the one time, and I was talking about censorship. So anyway, well, you guys have a fantastic weekend. I've got a few things planned. I'm finishing up some pieces that I want to get. I have one piece that has an element of surface like paint. I'm going to be painting on it, and I need to get this piece to that point. So it's got a bunch of stitching before I paint. So I'm hoping to get the stitching to that point this weekend, and then get the paint done because it's spray paint, so it needs to take place outside. So I want that to happen and be done before we've got snow on the ground and it's the holidays and stuff. So that's what my weekend is focused on, is finishing that piece or getting it to a certain point. So I hope you guys have something likewise as productive, but crafty, creative. I hope you have something like that planned for the weekend. I'll be back Monday as normal. Like I said, we'll start looking at that exhibit. Tuesday, Jill and I are still working through this book. We've just started it. We read the introduction in chapter 1. We're getting into chapters 2 and 3. If you are possibly interested in picking up this book and reading it, we have a link to our Amazon, but I'm pretty sure I found this on Abe. So if you wanted to buy a used copy of it, you can get a used copy. But really good book thus far. So whether you're following along with us or not, from the book club perspective, or if you just want to have it in your library to read, I highly, highly recommend it. Definitely add it to your bookshelf. So, all right, guys, I am going to head off. Stay warm and have a super weekend. And I love you guys. I couldn't do this without you. Wouldn't want to do it without you. So I will see you on the flip side. Bye. Mwah.